Sony's RX100 series of compact digital cameras are pretty much the benchmark when it comes to getting a high-performance imaging device in a very compact footprint. These devices are feature-rich and are intended to not really replace a DSLR system, but rather to give you almost the imaging quality that you'd get out of a regular DSLR camera in a far more portable solution. The RX100 Mark VI has undergone a few changes compared to previous models, so let's see if Sony has managed to retain that compact powerhouse character. Design-wise, not a huge deal has changed with the RX100 Mark VI, and it stays very true to the RX100 series overall. What we have here is a very high performance camera in the compact body of a point and shoot. This is of course highly desirable for traveling or just more general on-the-go scenarios. In the hand, the build quality doesn't exactly scream super premium at you, but it doesn't feel poorly constructed either. There's enough heft to reassure you that you are indeed handling a quality product, not a toy. In typical Sony fashion, we do get a fair number of buttons and other switches. Along the top is the electronic viewfinder, the built-in flash, the flash release, the power button, the shutter button / zoom toggle, and mode dial. The right side is reserved for the data and HDMI ports, both of which have protective dust covers, whereas the left side has the viewfinder release switch and the location for the NFC chip. One feature that Sony added in here is the fact that you can also use the viewfinder release switch as a power button as well. By popping it up, the camera will automatically power on, and likewise when you push the viewfinder back down again, the camera will power down. But if you don't want this feature, then it is something that you can turn off within the settings. The front is, of course, where we find the lens, but there's another feature in here in the form of what almost looks like a focusing or zoom ring. In fact, you can assign it to be a zoom control, but it doesn't appear that you can set it to adjust your focusing. The rotation of the ring is pretty smooth for the most part, but there is just a little bit of a frictional noise and some play with reference to being able to slightly move the ring forwards and backwards. As is the case with all cameras, the rear is where the main controls are located. The most prominent feature is the 3-inch touch panel. Unfortunately, as I discovered in my review of Sony's A6500, the actual touch functionality is limited only to selecting a focus point and as a touch shutter option. You can't navigate through menus, etc. I'm not sure exactly why Sony has chosen to take this direction, as it almost renders the whole purpose of the touch display to be useless. But still, at least being able to use it to select the focusing point is very useful nonetheless. The display is articulated, giving you around 180 degrees of movement, and being able to move it around is great, especially when you start taking pictures or videos at all kinds of funky angles. Moving on to the rest of the rear panel, we get a dedicated recording button for video shooting, a function button, a menu button, a play button, and a delete button. Then in the center of all of that is the multifunctional dial/button combo. This allows you quick access to some of the most important settings, such as the flash settings, exposure settings, and the drive mode. Overall, whilst I feel that the controls are rather well laid out, given the compact nature of the camera, I can also see those with larger digits experiencing some finger troubles. Not only are the buttons quite small, but some of them also sit almost perfectly flush with the body of the camera. Once Sony gets around to making a Mark VII, I do hope that they consider either increasing the size of the buttons or at the very least raising them slightly. It should also be noted that Sony did do a bit of a switcheroo with regards to the lens. Where the previous RX100 had just a 24 to 70mm lens, the Mark VI now has a 24 to 200mm lens. So at first glance, this seems like a decent upgrade, but it's not all that great if you care about what the new lens means for low light photography. Unfortunately, this lens change has affected the maximum aperture at both the wide and tele end of the lens. Instead of a nice big f1.8 for the wide end, we're now only getting a maximum of f2.8. And likewise for the tele side, we're now getting a maximum of f4.5 instead of f2.8. In terms of the overall functionality, Sony's cameras are pretty much known for being stuffed with features, and the Mark VI is no different. Where the A6500 caters more for photographers, the RX100 series is more aimed at vloggers and other amateur videographers. But don't let that fool you into thinking that it lacks photography features. On the contrary, some of it actually surpasses what the A6500 has to offer. Let's deal with the video first. Here we have a camera that's capable of shooting up to 4K video resolution, and this is at 30, 25 or 24 frames per second. Moving down to full HD resolution, we have a choice of shooting at up to 120 frames per second for some nice slow motion capturing. This is the same as we saw on the A6500. But where the Mark VI takes things to a whole other level is by being able to shoot at up to 1000 frames per second, albeit at a pretty low resolution. One absolutely amazing standout feature of the A6500 was its blisteringly fast autofocus system. At a mere 0.03 seconds required to acquire focusing, Sony proudly boasted that the A6500 had the fastest focusing speed around. Now, despite the Mark VI not having as many focusing points as the A6500, we are once again seeing that 0.03 second autofocus speed popping up. As we noted in the A6500 review, such an incredibly fast focusing system is phenomenal for fast action sports or perhaps even wildlife photography. One feature that is quite strange is the fact that the Mark VI has both a slightly larger burst shot buffer size as well as being able to capture twice as many photos per second as the A6500. As mentioned, the 6500 tends to be catered more towards photographers in mind, so it's a bit weird to see the more do-it-all RX100 to be more capable with respect to burst shots. With a continuous burst shot rate of just under 24 frames per second and a maximum buffer of 109 images in RAW format, it's unlikely that the RX100 Mark VI will ever let you down. As far as the user interface is concerned, if you're familiar with the way Sony structures its menus, then you'll likely navigate around the Mark VI's menu like a champ. But if you're new to Sony, then be forewarned that you'll have a bit of a learning curve with the Mark VI. It's not that it's horribly unintuitive per se, but because Sony stuffs so many features and settings into their devices, it can be a little overwhelming at first, and navigating your way through it all can be a little daunting. For example, it took me a good couple of minutes to figure out where the setting is to change the function of the control ring on the lens. After searching through a couple of times, I discovered that it lies on the 9th page of the second camera settings tab. The issue was that because the first couple of options under that specific tab were all related to various video settings, I had just skipped over this tab and instead looked for the setting for that control ring under more general settings. But again, that's mainly an issue for people who aren't familiar with Sony's cameras. One area we really should talk about is the battery life, or rather, somewhat the lack thereof. Unfortunately, there's really no such thing as the best of both worlds. If you're gonna stuff such high-performance camera bits into such a compact device, well, then there's not much space left for a decent battery. As a result, we get a maximum of just 240 shots when using the 3-inch panel on the rear, or down to 220 shots when using the electronic viewfinder. And here I was thinking that the 350 shot limit of the A6500 was pretty low. Now, the other thing before I forget is to mention that the camera does not come with an external charger. You have to charge the battery while it is inside the camera by plugging in a micro USB cable connected to a charger or to your computer. So this makes things a little difficult in the sense that you can't be charging one battery while using another if you decide to get an extra battery. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so on to the image quality. Despite being more of a performer in the video department, as noted, the Mark VI does have some very decent imaging features as well, but features only mean so much. The actual image quality is arguably far more important. Overall, Sony has done a great job here, and the Mark VI is capable of producing some very good photos. We're seeing a nice consistent sharpness over the vast majority of the range of the new lens. Colors seem reasonably accurate, and there isn't too much of a problem when it comes to the noise reduction when shooting JPEGs. When it comes to video, honestly, this is the Mark 6's forte. If we take into consideration the 4K capability and the relatively good slow motion capabilities, then the Mark 6 makes far more than just a decent compact camera. With regards to the 4K video, what Sony did here was somewhat clever. Instead of just using the sensor in 3840 by 2160 resolution, the video image is actually captured from the entire 5500 pixel width and then downsampled to 4K. This results in a noticeably more detailed capturing of the scene. But unfortunately, doing things in this manner does require a substantial increase in processing power, and so we are limited to only being able to capture 4K video for no more than 5 minutes. So this is best left for shooting short scenes. The Mark 6 also gives you the option to record in what is called S-Log. If you're unfamiliar with what this is, essentially what it attempts to provide you is a capturing of the scene with as little processing as possible being done to the data. This is to give you more headroom when doing color correcting and grading in post-production. So finally, when it comes to the value, when we consider everything that the Mark 6 is, we're left with two main ideas in terms of value. On the one hand, the Mark 6, as far as imaging is concerned, has taken a bit of a turn from its predecessors. That new lens may have improved, or rather just extended, the focal range, but it has come at the cost of some low light performance and shallow depth of field effects. What this means is that for more avid photographers who want an ultra-compact high-performance camera, perhaps the previous iteration, the Mark V, would be more suitable, unless you need the super-fast autofocus and the high burst shot rate. But on the other hand, where we start to see the value of the Mark VI emerge is when we consider it as a do-it-all camera. It truly is a jack-of-all-trades, offering very respectable image quality, very decent video features, and again that incredibly fast autofocus and burst shot rate. It's a master of none, but a very good all-round compact offering from Sony. It's the type of camera that you buy if you want something that does everything well, rather than doing one or a few specific things very well. If you need more focus on imaging performance and perhaps the ability to exchange lenses, then perhaps consider something like the A6500 instead, which coincidentally has the same price tag. Thanks for watching. If you've got any questions or comments, leave them down below. That's all from me for now. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.